The fluorescent lights in the 42nd floor conference room buzzed with that particular frequency that makes your teeth ache. I'd sat in this glass-walled room 100 times before, but today the air felt different, charged, dangerous. "Pack your bags and leave." The words echoed off the glass walls. Brandon Castellano, our new owner, stood there in his $1,000 suit, red-faced and pointing toward the exit like we were nothing more than janitors who'd forgotten to empty the trash. "You heard me. The entire cybersecurity department is terminated, effective immediately." 23 people, 23 careers, gone in one sentence. My hands remained steady on the laptop in front of me, but my heart was racing. Not from fear, from something else entirely, because Brandon Castellano had just made the biggest mistake of his $3.5 billion acquisition. He had no idea what was coming. The silence in that conference room was deafening. I could hear someone's coffee mug being set down too hard on the table. I could hear the ventilation system humming through the ceiling panels. I could hear Brandon's expensive leather shoes squeaking against the polished floor as he shifted his weight, waiting for us to react, to beg, to show fear. We gave him nothing. Before we get into what happened next, I want to take a moment. If you're enjoying stories about corporate justice and workplace revenge, consider subscribing to the channel. We just completed our first milestone, and now we're reaching toward 2,000 subscribers. Your support means these stories keep coming. Hit that subscribe button and let's grow this community together. My name is Elena Vasquez, Chief Information Security Officer at Titan Shield Technologies. Well, former CISO now, I suppose. I grew up in a neighborhood where my mother worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on, and my father spent weekends fixing neighbors' computers for grocery money. We weren't poor, not really, but we knew what it meant to struggle. We knew what it meant when someone lost their job. We understood that behind every employee ID badge was a family, a mortgage, a kid's college fund. My parents owned their home. We had food on the table. I went to college on scholarships and part-time work, but I watched my mother choose between fixing the car and buying new work shoes. I watched my father help people who couldn't afford to pay him because it was the right thing to do. That upbringing taught me empathy. It taught me to see people, not just resources. It taught me that loyalty goes both ways, and respect is earned, not bought. It taught me that how you treat people when you have power over them defines who you really are. Brandon Castellano never learned any of those lessons.
6 months earlier, Titan Shield Technologies had been the crown jewel of enterprise cybersecurity. We protected the data infrastructure for Fortune 500 companies, government contractors, healthcare systems, and financial institutions. Our reputation was built on one fundamental principle: trust. I'd spent 8 years building the security team from the ground up. Every person I hired wasn't just qualified on paper. They were people I'd trust with my own data, my own family's information. We ran drills, updated protocols, and stayed ahead of threats that kept other companies' executives awake at night. Our response time to security incidents averaged 4.3 minutes. Industry standard was 30 minutes. We'd prevented over 200 serious breach attempts in the previous year alone. We'd saved our clients an estimated $400 million in potential damages, ransomware payments, and regulatory fines. Then Castellano Ventures made their offer. $3.5 billion. The founders of Titan Shield, who'd started the company in a garage 15 years ago, couldn't refuse. I didn't blame them. That kind of money changes lives, secures generations. They'd earned it. But acquisitions also change cultures. The first warning sign came during the transition meetings. Brandon Castellano walked into our operations center, looked around at the wall of monitoring screens, the team tracking threats in real time, and said,
This seems excessive. How much are we spending on all these people? Our CFO, Thomas Wu, patiently explained that cybersecurity wasn't an expense, it was insurance. It was the moat protecting $3.5 billion worth of investment. Brandon waved him off. I've got a guy who can automate most of this. We'll cut costs by 60% in the first quarter. Thomas tried to argue. So did I. We explained that automation was part of our strategy, but human expertise was irreplaceable. Threats evolved daily. AI could catch patterns, but it took human intuition to catch the sophisticated attacks. Brandon wasn't interested in our expertise. He'd already made up his mind. The layoffs started small. Administrative staff, HR personnel, redundancies, Brandon called them. People who'd worked at Titan Shield for years, who knew our systems and culture, were replaced with Castellano Ventures' own people. Then he came for the engineering teams. Junior developers were let go first, then senior engineers who'd built core systems. Brandon replaced them with contracted offshore teams at a fraction of the cost. Never mind that these contractors didn't understand our infrastructure, our clients, or our security requirements.
Jackson Park had been our senior network security analyst for 6 years. He'd identified and neutralized 17 major breach attempts in that time, saving our clients millions in potential damages. He had a wife, Amy, and twin daughters who just started kindergarten. Jackson was the kind of analyst who saw patterns others missed. He'd once identified a breach attempt based on nothing more than a slight irregularity in login timestamps. That kind of intuition can't be taught from a manual. Brandon called him into a meeting and fired him for inefficiency. The evidence? Jackson had taken 3 days to resolve a complex security ticket that Brandon's automation expert claimed should have taken 3 hours. Jackson's ticket had involved tracing a sophisticated phishing attempt back through 4 proxy servers across 3 continents, identifying the source, implementing new protocols to prevent similar attacks, and documenting everything for our compliance reports. It was brilliant work that potentially saved one of our healthcare clients from a ransomware attack that could have compromised patient records. Brandon didn't care about any of that. Jackson was gone by end of business. I escalated to Thomas, who escalated to the board, but Castellano Ventures now owned controlling interest. The original founders had their payout and had stepped back. We were on our own. The team started to panic. Everyone could see the writing on the wall. People who dedicated years to Titan Shield were sending out resumes, taking calls from recruiters during lunch breaks. I called an off-site meeting at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. 18 members of my core security team showed up. We need to talk about what happens if this gets worse, I told them. Angela Chen, our infrastructure specialist, spoke first. You mean when it gets worse. Brandon's bringing in his own people. We've all seen this before. New ownership cleans house. She wasn't wrong. I'd watched this pattern play out at other companies. New leadership wanted their own team, their own loyalists. Competence didn't matter. History didn't matter. If they do clean house, I said carefully, we need to make sure the transition is handled properly. We have access to incredibly sensitive systems, client data, security protocols, infrastructure keys. Liam Foster, our systems architect, caught my meaning immediately. Standard offboarding procedures, documented handoffs, everything by the book. Exactly, I said. And if proper procedures aren't followed, there need to be safeguards. By the book, I agreed, but we should also have contingencies, automated protocols that protect company data if offboarding isn't handled correctly. What I was suggesting wasn't illegal, it was standard security practice. When personnel with high-level access leave a company, their credentials get revoked, their access gets transferred, and fail-safes ensure no orphaned administrative rights remain active. We just needed to make sure those fail-safes were robust, very robust. Over the next 2 weeks, during late nights and weekend system maintenance windows, we implemented what we called the Transition Integrity Protocol,
On paper, it was a security measure ensuring that if administrative credentials weren't properly transferred within 72 hours of personnel termination, temporary locks would engage to prevent unauthorized access. In practice, it was considerably more comprehensive than that. Every member of the core security team had administrative access to critical systems. If those credentials weren't formally transferred to authorized replacement personnel through proper channels, the protocol would activate. First, a 48-hour warning would trigger, then a 24-hour warning. Then, if no proper handoff had occurred, the systems would enter protective lockdown. Data wouldn't be deleted, nothing would be destroyed, but access would be restricted to only the most essential functions until proper security protocols could be re-established. At least that was version 1 of the protocol. Angela had other ideas. If they're going to fire us without proper transition, they're going to compromise every client we protect, she said during one of our late-night sessions. Maybe the protocol should be more aggressive. How aggressive? Liam asked. Angela's smile was cold. How about we make sure they understand exactly how valuable we were? We debated it for hours. Some team members thought we were going too far. Others thought we weren't going far enough. But everyone agreed on one thing. If Brandon was going to dismantle the security team, he needed to understand the consequences.
I should have said no. I should have kept the protocol limited to basic security lockdowns. But I thought about Jackson, explaining to his wife that he'd lost his job. I thought about the 3 other team members Brandon had fired over petty grievances. I thought about the remaining team members terrified they'd be next. I thought about Brandon Castellano walking through our operations center like he owned it, which he did, treating years of expertise like it was worthless. Make it educational, I told Angela. If they don't respect what we do, maybe they need a demonstration of what happens when cybersecurity isn't taken seriously. The updated protocol had levels. Stage 1 was the lockdown, restricted access, systems frozen until proper security review. Stage 2 was more pointed. Non-essential data would be quarantined. Reports would be generated showing every vulnerability in the network that had been actively monitored and protected by the team. Those vulnerabilities would become very visible. Stage 3 was the nuclear option. If after 7 days no proper security transition had occurred, if no qualified personnel had been brought in to properly restore and secure the systems, the protocol would assume the company had been compromised. All sensitive client data would be encrypted and backed up to secure, isolated servers. The production systems would be wiped to bare metal and restored to factory default. Scorched earth, a complete reset. They'll never let it get to stage 3, Liam said. The moment stage 1 hits, they'll be scrambling to bring us back or bring in qualified replacements. Probably, I agreed. But if Brandon is as arrogant as I think he is, maybe he needs to see stage 2 before he takes this seriously. We tested the protocol in isolated sandbox environments. It worked flawlessly. The triggers were solid, the timelines were clearly documented in our Security Procedures Manual, buried in Appendix 7, subsection 12, but documented nonetheless. Every action was logged and auditable. This wasn't sabotage, this was security best practice taken to its logical conclusion. We just didn't tell anyone it was armed and active. I documented everything in my personal notes. Times, dates, decisions, rationale. If this ever came back on us, I wanted a clear record that we acted to protect company and client data, not to cause harm. 3 weeks later, Brandon called an all-hands meeting for the technology division. Mandatory attendance. Conference room B on the 42nd floor. I knew what was coming. We all did. Brandon stood at the head of the table, flanked by 2 people I'd never seen before. One was introduced as Dmitry Kozlov, Chief Technology Strategist from Castellano Ventures. The other was Natalie Huang, apparently Brandon's pick for Director of IT Operations. Neither had cybersecurity backgrounds. I'd done my research. Dimitri's experience was in software sales and business development. Natalie had managed IT support desks at mid-size companies. Her biggest credential was implementing a ticketing system and reducing password reset times. They were going to replace my entire expert security team with an IT help desk manager and a salesman. Brandon didn't waste time with pleasantries. The technology division is being restructured to align with Castellano Ventures' operational efficiency standards. After careful review, we've determined that the current cybersecurity department represents significant budgetary overlap with redundant functions that can be automated or consolidated. Corporate speak for "you're all fired." Effective immediately, the cybersecurity department is being dissolved. Your positions are eliminated. You'll be escorted to collect personal items, and your access will be terminated as of 5 p.m. today. Angela started to stand. I put a hand on her arm. Not yet. Thomas Wu, our CFO, spoke up. Brandon, we need to discuss transition protocols. These team members have administrative access to critical systems. We need proper handoff procedures, documentation, credential transfers. Already handled, Brandon interrupted. Dimitri and Natalie will be taking over all necessary functions. We've got automation systems ready to deploy. This will be seamless. I almost laughed. Seamless. He thought cybersecurity was something you could automate away like expense reports.
"You're making a serious mistake," I said quietly. Brandon's attention snapped to me. "Excuse me?" Our team protects infrastructure supporting 247 enterprise clients. We monitor and respond to an average of 63 threat events per day. We maintain security protocols that have kept this company breach-free for 8 consecutive years. You can't replace that with automation and good intentions. Ms. Vasquez, I appreciate your concern, but we've consulted with experts. Your department's functions can be handled with 20% of the current headcount and 70% lower costs. That's just good business. Have your experts reviewed our security architecture, our active monitoring systems, our incident response protocols? Brandon's smile was condescending. They've reviewed everything necessary. Now, if you'd like to leave with a positive reference and your full severance package, I suggest you pack your things quietly. I stood. So did the rest of the team. 23 people rising as one. For the record, I said clearly, making sure the meeting recorder caught every word, the cybersecurity team is formally notifying executive leadership that terminating our positions without proper security transition procedures will compromise system integrity and client data protection. We're prepared to provide comprehensive handoff documentation and conduct proper credential transfers to qualified replacement personnel. This process typically requires 2 to 3 weeks for an organization of this complexity. Brandon actually laughed. 2 to 3 weeks? Ms. Vasquez, you're terminated. You have until 5 p.m. to clear out your desk. Security will escort you if necessary. Understood. Please document that we offered proper transition and that offer was refused by executive leadership. I want that in writing. Thomas looked stricken. He understood what I was saying, even if Brandon didn't. He understood that I was building a legal record, documenting that we'd tried to do this the right way. We collected our belongings in silence. Personal photos, coffee mugs, the small things that make an office space human. Angela had a cactus she'd named Larry. Liam had a collection of vintage computer parts on his shelf. Security guards watched us like we were criminals. These were people we'd worked with for years, who'd smiled at us every morning. Now they stood stone-faced, following Brandon's orders. At 4:45 p.m., we walked out together. 23 people who'd protected billions of dollars in infrastructure and client data, walking out like we never mattered at all. At 5 p.m. exactly, our credentials were revoked. At 5:01 p.m., the Transition Integrity Protocol activated its first countdown. I was home when my personal phone buzzed with a secure notification. Angela had set up a shadow monitoring system, completely legal, just passive logging of our former company's public-facing systems and status pages. The Transition Integrity Protocol had begun its 48-hour warning cycle. Every active administrator account that hadn't been properly transferred was now flagged. Automated warnings were being sent to the IT operations email list, which included Thomas Wu and the board, along with Brandon, Dimitri, and Natalie. The warnings were clear. Critical administrative credentials terminated without proper security transition. System integrity protocols will engage in 48 hours unless proper handoff procedures are completed with qualified security personnel. I imagined Dimitri and Natalie staring at those warnings, probably dismissing them as automated noise from systems they didn't understand. I imagined Brandon ignoring them entirely. I didn't sleep well that night. Part of me hoped they'd take the warning seriously, bring us back in for proper transition, handle this like professionals. Another part of me knew Brandon's ego wouldn't allow it. The next morning, I received a call from Thomas Wu. "Elena, please tell me you can stop whatever's happening." "What's happening, Thomas?" "The security systems are sending warnings. Dimitri says they're just error messages from your team's accounts being deactivated, but the language seems more serious than that. He tried to dismiss them, but our legal team is concerned. The Transition Integrity Protocol is standard security practice. When high-level administrative access is terminated, automated fail-safes engage to prevent security gaps. It's all documented in our Security Procedures Manual. Can you deactivate it?" "I don't have access anymore. My credentials were revoked, remember? The protocol can only be cleared by either properly transferring the administrative functions to qualified replacement personnel or by having current qualified security staff manually verify that all systems are secure." "We don't have current qualified security staff. Brandon fired all of them." "I'm aware." Silence on the line. Then, "What happens when the 48 hours is up?" "Stage 1 lockdown. Non-essential systems will be restricted until proper security review can be completed. It's a safety measure to prevent unauthorized access through orphaned credentials." "How bad are we talking?" "Depends on how competent Dimitri and Natalie are. If they understand security architecture and can demonstrate proper protocols, the system will recognize authorized management and stand down. If they can't, I let the implication hang."
"Thomas, the protocol exists to protect the company and clients. If unqualified people have access to sensitive systems without proper security oversight, that's a legitimate crisis. Would you rather discover that problem now or after a major breach?" Thomas knew I was right. "Brandon won't bring you back. He's too proud. He told the board this was all scare tactics from disgruntled former employees. Then he should bring in qualified replacements immediately. We can provide consultation remotely to help with the transition. No charge. We just want to make sure the systems and client data are protected." I'll tell him, "Elena, thank you for building in these safeguards. I think." The 48 hours expired on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Stage 1 engaged exactly on schedule. According to Angela's monitoring, every non-essential administrative function locked down. Development servers, testing environments, internal tools, all restricted to read-only mode. Production systems remained operational, but administrative access was limited to core functions only. Any changes to security settings, any modifications to monitoring systems, any attempts to bypass the protocols, all blocked. Dimitri apparently panicked and tried to force access through backup administrative accounts. He'd found documentation of our emergency access protocols and thought he could override the system. He couldn't. Those backup accounts were part of the protocol's monitoring. The protocol interpreted that as a potential security breach, unauthorized access attempts using emergency credentials. Stage 2 activated immediately, skipping the 24-hour warning. Suddenly, every vulnerability in Titan Shield's network became visible. The protocol generated comprehensive reports showing every potential security gap that our team had been actively monitoring and protecting against. Open ports that we'd been watching for suspicious activity, outdated software components that we'd scheduled for patches, third-party integrations that we'd sandboxed and monitored. Individually, none of these were critical. That's why we'd managed them proactively rather than dropping everything to fix them immediately. We'd had monitoring in place, mitigation strategies, scheduled remediation. But presented all at once to someone without security expertise, it looked like Titan Shield's infrastructure was held together with duct tape and prayers. The reports were automatically sent to the board, to compliance, to our legal team. They showed every potential risk, every attack vector, every vulnerability, without the context of our active monitoring and protection. Brandon called an emergency board meeting.
The former security team sabotaged our systems, Brandon was shouting, according to Thomas, who called me immediately after the meeting. They did no such thing, Thomas had argued. These are automated security protocols. Elena warned you this would happen. I warned you this would happen. You fired them anyway. Then tell her to fix it. You fired her. You fired all of them. You want their help now, you're going to have to negotiate for it. That's when Brandon made his second massive mistake. Instead of reaching out to us, instead of bringing in qualified security consultants, instead of admitting he'd screwed up and needed expert help, Brandon called his lawyers. He claimed we'd installed malicious code. He threatened criminal charges. He sent cease and desist letters to all 23 of us, demanding we restore access immediately and threatening legal action for sabotage, breach of contract, and corporate espionage. Angela called me laughing. He thinks we can just flip a switch and turn it off. He has no idea how any of this works. The protocol is following its documented procedures exactly. Every action is logged and justified. We haven't touched anything since our access was revoked. I know, but Brandon's lawyers are making serious threats. What do? We forward everything to our own lawyers, document everything, and we wait. My lawyer, Christine Rodriguez, reviewed everything and actually smiled. This is the most well-documented automated security protocol I've ever seen. You're completely protected. They'd have to prove you intended harm rather than security protection, and your documentation clearly shows security intent. The 7-day deadline for Stage 3 was approaching. 6 days, 5 days. On day 4, Titan Shield's clients started noticing problems, not breaches, not data loss, just sluggish performance and limited functionality. The security lockdowns were affecting production systems now, prioritizing security over performance. Client complaints started rolling in. Service tickets piled up. Dimitri and Natalie had no idea how to resolve them. On day 5, Thomas called me again. Elena, please. The board is furious. We're going to lose clients. Brandon is on the verge of being removed, but that doesn't help us if the systems collapse first. Thomas, I want to help, but we don't have access. The protocol is automated. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do, protecting company assets when proper security governance isn't in place. What would it take to stop it? Proper security transition, bring in qualified personnel, document everything, and show that the company has legitimate, competent cybersecurity management again. The protocol will recognize that and disengage. We need you back.
Brandon fired us, Thomas, all 23 of us, publicly, with security escorts. We've all got job offers from other companies now. I'm starting at Core Defense Systems on Monday. Angela's going to CyberShield. Liam got recruited by a government contractor. You'd need to make this worth our while. Name your price. I thought about it. About Brandon's arrogance, about Jackson Park's twin daughters, about the 23 people who'd been treated like disposable resources.
full reinstatement of the entire cybersecurity team, back pay from termination date, public acknowledgement from Brandon that the firing was a mistake, and full operational authority for cybersecurity decisions, reporting directly to the board, not to Brandon. I'll see what I can do. But he couldn't do it fast enough. Brandon was still arguing with the board, still claiming this was all a plot by vindictive former employees, still insisting his people could fix it. On day 7, at exactly 5 p.m., Stage 3 activated. Every piece of sensitive client data was encrypted with military-grade encryption and backed up to isolated secure servers. The encryption keys were distributed across multiple secure locations, accessible only through proper security protocols and proper authorization. Then the production systems wiped themselves clean, not deleted, not destroyed, just restored to factory default settings, exactly as if someone had performed a clean OS installation on every server. Every application removed, every configuration reset, everything returned to the state it would be in if you just unpacked the hardware from the manufacturer. Angela's monitoring showed it happening in real time, server after server, going dark, then coming back online with nothing but base operating systems. I felt sick watching it, even though I knew the data was safely backed up. This was nuclear. This was career-ending for Brandon. This was exactly what he deserved. The Titan Shield Operations Center went dark. Client services went offline. 247 enterprise companies suddenly lost their security infrastructure protection. Monitoring systems stopped reporting. Threat detection went silent. Everything just stopped. My phone started ringing. Not Thomas this time, the board chair, Victoria Brennan. "Ms. Vasquez, we need your team back immediately. Name your terms." In the background, I could hear shouting, Brandon's voice, arguing, being overruled. I already gave Thomas our terms. Done, all of it. Brandon no longer has operational authority. He's been removed from the management structure. You'll report directly to the board, whatever you need. In writing, contract signed before we step foot in the building. You'll have it within the hour.
We negotiated for 6 hours. The entire cybersecurity team on one conference call, the Titan Shield board on another, lawyers from both sides trying to hammer out details. In the end, we got almost everything we asked for. Full reinstatement with seniority restored, back pay plus 20% premium for the disruption, long-term contracts with significant severance protections, Brandon Castellano removed from operational authority. He remained majority owner but was prohibited from interfering with technology decisions. Cybersecurity would report directly to the board with full operational autonomy. And Brandon had to send a company-wide email taking full responsibility for the disaster. We returned the next morning. All 23 of us walked back into the operations center we'd built. The restoration took 72 hours of intense work. We retrieved the encrypted data backups, verified their integrity, and began systematic restoration of systems. Clients were offline for 3 days total. We worked around the clock, sleeping in the office, running on coffee and adrenaline. Titan Shield's reputation took a massive hit. 17 clients terminated their contracts immediately, unwilling to trust us after the outage. Another 43 demanded significant discounts and service guarantees. The legal team spent weeks negotiating settlements. The company Brandon had bought for $3.5 billion was now worth approximately $1.8 billion. He'd destroyed almost $2 billion in value in 3 weeks. Castellano Ventures board was reportedly considering forcing him out entirely. Dimitri and Natalie were quietly let go. No dramatic firing, just severance packages and NDAs. I almost felt bad for them. They'd been set up to fail, put in positions they weren't qualified for by a boss who didn't understand what he was doing. Brandon himself showed up once during our restoration work. He stood in the doorway of the operations center, watching us work. I met his eyes. He looked away first. He never spoke to me directly again. That was 8 months ago. Titan Shield has rebuilt most of its client relationships. We've implemented even more robust security protocols.
And we've made sure our employment contracts now include very specific language about proper security transitions and the consequences of improper termination of security personnel. The Transition Integrity Protocol is now standard across our operations, but with board oversight and approval. We documented everything, published a case study, and shared our experience at industry conferences. That was 8 months ago. The story went viral in cybersecurity circles. The Transition Integrity Protocol is now standard practice across our industry, with dozens of companies implementing similar safeguards. There's even discussion of making it a regulatory requirement for companies handling sensitive data. Titan Shield has rebuilt most client relationships and implemented even stronger security protocols. Our employment contracts now include specific language about proper security transitions and the consequences of improper termination of security personnel. Jackson Park is back with us, promoted to Principal Security Analyst. His twins just finished kindergarten. Angela Chen is now Deputy CISO, overseeing infrastructure security with a team of 12. She still has Larry the Cactus on her desk. Liam Foster is our Chief Technology Officer, leading our Security First Technology Division. And me, I'm still Elena Vasquez, still CISO, still protecting the infrastructure that keeps businesses running and data secure. But now I have a seat at the board table and the authority to ensure this never happens again. The company Brandon bought for $3.5 billion dropped to approximately $1.8 billion in value. He destroyed nearly $2 billion in 3 weeks because he didn't understand a fundamental truth. The people who protect your most critical assets aren't overhead to be minimized, they're investments to be valued. We didn't sabotage Titan Shield, we protected it from incompetent leadership. We made sure that when proper security couldn't be maintained, the systems defaulted to safety rather than risk. That's what cybersecurity is supposed to do. My mother still asks me about work when I visit. My father tells the story to anyone who listens, embellishing it more each time. They taught me empathy, taught me to see people rather than resources. They taught me that standing up for what's right sometimes means taking risks. Brandon Castellano saw us as expenses to be cut, problems to be solved with automation and cost reduction. He found out the hard way what happens when you forget that behind every security protocol, every line of code, every monitoring system, there are people. People with expertise, people with dignity, people who deserve respect. This story isn't about revenge, it's about understanding that efficiency and cost-cutting aren't always the same as effectiveness. It's about recognizing that some expertise can't be automated away or replaced with cheaper alternatives. Most of all, it's about respect. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in workplace justice and holding arrogant leadership accountable, I'd appreciate your subscription. We're building a community of people who understand that respect goes both ways in any workplace. We just hit our first milestone, and now we're reaching toward 2,000 subscribers. Your support makes these stories possible. Thank you for watching, and remember, always respect your cybersecurity team. They're protecting more than just your data. They're protecting everything you've built.